10 Innocent People Who Suffered for Crimes They Didn't Commit. By Morris M. Certainty Checked by Jamie Frater. It's something that the majority of us can just envision in our haziest bad dreams. Being captured or denounced by the press for a wrongdoing that we didn't perpetrate. It's the stuff of Academy Award-winning shows and Franz Kafka books. It's likewise something that happens more frequently than we'd prefer to think. The following individuals come from varying backgrounds. Some are rich, some are poor. Some are white, some are Middle Eastern, East Asian, or Hispanic. The one thing they share, practically speaking, is that conditions schemed to cause them to seem blameworthy of a horrendous wrongdoing they don't had anything to do with. Figure it couldn't occur to you? This rundown recommends we should reconsider. 10. Richard Jewell. Missing the point. The Richard Jewell case. Picture the scene. You're a safety officer allotted to secure observers at an undeniable level occasion. As a feature of your rounds, you find a dubious-looking sack. You quickly clear the space of individuals. At the point when the pack detonates just minutes after the fact, killing one and harming more than 110, your speedy reasoning has evidently saved lives. What do you hope to happen next? If you address that, you'll be hailed as a saint, misfortune. At the point when this accurate situation occurred at the 1996 Atlanta Olympic Games, safety officer Richard Jewell wasn't openly celebrated. He was involved by the FBI in executing a demonstration of homegrown terrorism. Although Jewell had verifiably saved lives, the media rushed to paint him as a beast. The Atlanta Journal distinguished him as the focal point of police consideration, prompting a media taking care of craze. Correspondents plunged on the pudgy safety officer, like piranha on a draining cow. They followed him to and from his home, going the entire night outside his windows and hollering questions intended to incite him. The FBI assaulted his condo on numerous occasions. Based on the media inclusion, 2 besieging casualties recorded claims against him. He turned into a public disdain figure. Also, it was in support of nothing. Jewell was cleared in late 1996. In 2003, conservative psycho Eric Rudolph was captured for the besieging and 3 different assaults that had designated gay bars and fetus removal facilities. 9. Yoshiyuki Kono. Hawaii 503x24 Duke knows Kono is innocent, but the prosecutor doesn't. One summer evening in 1994, Japanese Armageddon religion Om Shinrikyo discreetly delivered a haze of sarin nerve gas over a verdant suburb of Matsumoto. The assault was a trial for their notorious 1995 gassing of the Tokyo Metro. It surely worked. As the space's occupants dozed, the gas murdered 8 individuals and genuinely harmed 200. One of those influenced was Yoshiyuki Kono. A hardware sales rep, Kono had to look as his significant other surrendered to seizures welcomed on by the sarin, blood frothing from her mouth. He settled on the principal decision to specialists, who immediately concluded that he must be the man behind the attack. Despite having no involvement with making sarin, a generally troublesome weapon to make, Kono was openly distinguished as the executioner. Police had discovered photo-handling synthetic compounds on his property and reasoned that he'd unintentionally delivered the sarin. Even as Kono lay in the clinic, not a long way from his significant other who was kicking the bucket of sarin harming, they advised the media against him. Papers reviewed bogus statements ascribed to Kono that assumed liability for the assault. When Kono was delivered from the medical clinic, everybody in Japan was against him. Shockingly, he stayed a suspect even after AUM gassed the Tokyo Metro 9 months after the fact. It wasn't until 2003 that he got an authority statement of regret, long after AUM had assumed liability for the Matsumoto episode. 8. Bijan Ibrahimi. Bijan Ibrahimi, a lethal story of criminal police and vigilante neighbors. Now and again, a wrongdoing must have been carried out for somebody to endure the side effects. In 2013, neighbors of Bijan Ibrahimi, an incapacitated Iranian outcast living in Bristol, UK, chose, in light of definitely no proof, that he was a pedophile. Ibrahimi had been shooting nearby slimeball Lee James as James became inebriated in the road, expecting to utilize the recording as proof that his area was tormented with reserved conduct. James supposedly believed that Ibrahimi was recording his 2 little girls. He kicked his way into Ibrahimi's level and threatened to F.K. him up. You can see film of the experience in the video above. Justifiably terrified, Ibrahimi called the police. The police reacted by capturing him. Despite the recording of James undermining the debilitated man, nearby police trusted James's story that Ibrahimi had been shooting his children. Ibrahimi was reserved for breaking the harmony. As he was driven away, James hollered to the police that he would go rogue. Others yelled that Ibrahimi was a pedophile. At the station, Ibrahimi asked the police for insurance. They refused. The next morning, Ibrahimi was delivered to a holding-up horde. James had been spreading bits of hearsay about the evacuee, and everybody trusted him. Throughout the following 2 days, Ibrahimi would settle on 12 decisions to the police. At a certain point, he said that his life was in harm's way and beseeched them to help him. His supplications were ignored. Just past 12 p.m. on Sunday, July 14, Slime Bucket Lee James kicked Ibrahimi half to death outside his level and afterward killed him by setting him ablaze. Neighbors wouldn't help. In spite of being an entirely blameless man, Ibrahimi lost first his pride and afterward his life for a non-existent wrongdoing. 7. Sally Clark. Blameless mother sent to prison over statistical error. In the event that the heartbreaking story of Bijan Ibrahimi drove you crazy at the UK's equity framework, stand by until you read the story of Sally Clark. An effective legal counselor, she had the incident to have 2 youngsters capitulate to bunk passing, one out of 1996 and one out of 1998. Police then, at that point, captured this sadness-stricken mother for killing her children. At this point, it could in any case be contended that the police were taking care of their work. 2 bunk passing straight is genuinely improbable, all things considered. It wasn't until the case came to preliminary that things truly self-destructed. 2 master witnesses stood up and misled the court to make Clark seem as though a criminal. The originally was Professor Sir Roy Meadow. A pediatrician, he guaranteed that the odds of a family enduring 2 bed passing straight were 1 out of 73 million. In actuality, specialists accept that it very well may be any place between 1 out of 100 and 1 of every 8,500. The Royal Statistical Society said that Meadow had no reason for his statement. Even more awful was Dr. Alan Williams. A pathologist, he intentionally retained proof of microorganisms in one of the dead youngster's circulatory systems that might have prompted the child's death. Doubly misdirected, the jury sentenced Clark. She was imprisoned in 1999. It wasn't until 2003 that the failings of the master witnesses became visible. Clark was delivered and exonerated. Tragically, the story doesn't end there. Clark was so wrecked by her difficulty that she turned into a drunkard. She kicked the bucket in 2007 of liquor harming. In the meantime, Meadow and Williams are presently indeed working in medication. 6. Salaheddin Barhoum. High schooler wrongly blamed in marathon besieging remaining modest, persuaded. The blast of 2 pressing factor cooker bombs at the Boston Marathon in 2013 started probably the biggest manhunt in ongoing U.S. history. The city came to a standstill for quite a long time. On the web, a huge number of individuals transformed into easy chair analysts, poring over photographs of the long-distance race. Frantic for a scoop, the media joined the quarrel. Enter Salaheddin Barhoum. 16-year-old Barhoum had the setback to be shot going to the long-distance race while conveying a pack. He likewise had the disaster to look unmistakably unfamiliar. Barhoum was an American resident. That was sufficient for the New York Post. At the point when specialists were delivering proclamations saying that the planes had been conveying sacks, the paper printed an enormous image of Barhoum and 24-year-old Yassine Zaimi on their cover under the title text, Pac-Men. It was as close as possible get to simply printing the title text, "These honest individuals are the psychological militants who murdered your compatriots." Neither Barhoum nor Zaimi were needed by specialists, who were at that point focusing in on the Tsarnaev siblings. However, the New York Post's cover not just slandered them and caused them wretchedness, it put them at an undeniable danger of being attacked by individuals who saw the cover. Luckily, that didn't occur. After a nerve several days as disdain figures, Barhoum and Zaimi were cleared when the Tsarnaev siblings' pictures were delivered. The New York Post attempted to renege on paying them a penny in remuneration. It didn't work. 5. Latvi Rayc. Algerian pilot liberated on bail discusses his experience. In the consequence of 9/11, The world went into overdrive attempting to discover anybody associated with the psychological militant slime buckets who'd recently killed 3,000 individuals. One of the key presumes they were attempting to discover was whoever prepared the executioners to fly. Not nonsensically, the feds accepted that this individual would be a Muslim carrier pilot. Nonsensically, they then, at that point chose this pilot was Latvi Rayc, an Algerian carrier pilot living in London. Rayc was captured just a brief time after the assaults. UK specialists hauled him off to Belmarsh High Security Jail and kept him there without preliminary for 4.5 months. He was informed that he would be removed to the US and that he'd most likely be executed. During his visit in Belmarsh, he was kept in isolation for 23 hours every day, something which negatively affected his emotional well-being. Now, we ought to most likely bring up that the FBI had presumed that he was honest 2 entire months before anybody tried to deliver him. It deteriorates. After Rayc was delivered because of absence of proof, it became exposed that the 9/11 examiners never figured he ought to have been captured in any case. Regardless, Rayc was boycotted and put on a restricted travel backlog, a lovely harming move since his work was, carrier pilot. All at once, this guiltless man lost his vocation, his standing, and, momentarily, his freedom. Fortunately, the UK government later decided that he was qualified for £2 million in remuneration after he was excused completely. 4. Christopher Jeffries. Joe Yates wrongly blamed landowner Christopher Jeffries talks only to ITV News. Considerably more than Richard Jewell, Christopher Jeffries endured a preliminary by media. In 2010, understudy Joanna Yates was found killed. At that point, Jeffries was her landowner. Police called him in for a brief investigation, so, all in all things went crazy. Jeffries resembled an absolute weirdo. A resigned English instructor with a stun of messy white hair and an unkempt way of dress, he was a pitiless exaggeration of a chronic executioner. The media took one gander at this desolate crackpot and chose he must be guilty. The press invasion that followed was ghastly. Different papers ran cites from individuals who scarcely knew him, depicting him as a washout with a fixation on death. Things got so terrible that the books Jeffries instructed in his English class were highlighted as proof of his wiped out, disturbed psyche. Notwithstanding being broadly perused works of art of writing composed by individuals like Oscar Wilde. At their most noticeably awful, the smears entered a strange, bad dreamin' area. Appalling UK newspaper The Sun suggested that he was gay and composed a whole article about how he didn't care for sports, inferring that this made him a degenerate. The Daily Mirror considered him a unwelcome voyeur on its first page and gave an article to how he jumped at the chance to wear a messy scarf. Had Jeffries gone to preliminary, the media would have effectively biased any conceivable jury against him. Luckily, the case never got to preliminary. Yates' neighbor Vincent Tabak admitted to the homicide. Proof demonstrated he was liable. After 2 years, Jeffries was all the while sitting tight for a letter of statement of regret from the 8 papers that had stigmatized him. 3. Jean-Charles de Menezes. Jury return open verdict in Jean-Charles de Menezes inquest. If you somehow managed to figure every one of the mix-ups that prompted Jean-Charles de Menezes lying dead on a London tube stage, you'd reach the resolution that the chances were astronomical. In the fallout of the 7/7 London bombings that executed 52 individuals and left hundreds crippled, the Brazilian incidentally turned out to be living in a similar structure as needed presume Hussein Osman. De Menezes additionally coincidentally left for work when the covert official accused of shooting every individual who went back and forth was urinating. This far-fetched situation would rapidly demonstrate fatal. With no video film, police couldn't coordinate with de Menezes' face to an identification photograph of Osman. Stressed that the Brazilian was their criminal, they followed him. At the point when de Menezes attempted to get off his transport at Brixton, he saw the tube station was shut. He got back on a similar transport. Officials concluded that this was a run-of-the-mill hostile to observation procedure. They were currently persuaded that de Menezes was the needed bomber. The helpless man's karma went from awful to more regrettable. At the point when he got into the station at Stockwell, it was basically impossible that he might have realized he was being trailed by equipped police, who were persuaded he was going to assault the tube. At the point when he understood he was going to miss his train, de Menezes began to run. Thinking he was fleeing from them to explode a self-destruction bomb, the officials started shooting. Regardless of what was subsequently asserted, no observers heard the police shout out a notice. Workers initially acknowledged what was happening when de Menezes' blood splattered onto their clothes. The saddest part? De Menezes didn't look distantly like Osman, who wasn't even in the country. The real plane was subsequently captured in Rome. By then, at that point, it was past the point of no return. De Menezes was dead, executed for a wrongdoing to which he had no association with the exception of by means of misfortune. 2. Oklahoma City's Muslims. Oklahoma City bombing, flashback, NBC News. On April 19, 1995, conservative psychological oppressor Timothy McVeigh detonated a colossal truck bomb under the Alfred P. Mora Federal Building in Oklahoma City. The blast slaughtered 168, including 19 youngsters and 3 pregnant ladies. Before 9/11, it was the deadliest fear assault to occur on American soil. The bombarding, with its connections to Waco and Ruby Ridge, is currently indistinguishable from McVeigh and the civilian army development. At that point, however, things weren't obvious. In the quick result of the impact, doubt fell unequivocally on one gathering: Oklahoma City's Muslim community. Only 2 years prior, a bomb at the World Trade Center had murdered 6 and harmed more than 1,000. The schemers were Islamic fundamentalists. At the point when the Alfred P. Mora Federal Building imploded, the media quickly connected the two assaults. The Oklahoma City bomb was depicted on news shows as likely being crafted by Muslims. For those Muslims living in the area, that implied turning out to be disdain figures. A mosque in Indianapolis was taken shots at. Muslims in the roads were provoked with cries of "child executioner." Several unknown guests took steps to bomb Islamic focuses in retaliation or murder Muslim youngsters. For 3 entire days, the local area lived in a condition of sheer terror. Yet this scorn was to no end. In contrast to 9/11, the bombarding was completed by a white Christian. Fortunately, McVeigh was immediately gotten. The district's Muslims inhaled a moan of alleviation. 1. Timothy Evansfeature 1 Timothy Evans. Photograph credit. Lashemacher by means of YouTube. The instance of Timothy Evans makes for very awkward perusing. A Welshman living in London, he was hanged in 1950 for the homicide of his better half, Beryl, and child, Geraldine. Throughout his preliminary, Evans had guaranteed that his first-floor neighbor, John Christie, was the executioner. He considered him a killer. However, conditions appeared against him. Beryl had been pregnant, and Evans realized he was unable to stand to really focus on another child. To exacerbate the situation, neighbors had once in a while heard him shouting at his significant other in seemingly rough fights. Police derived that Evans had endeavored to drive an early termination on Beryl, just for it turn out badly. At the point when they looked through Evans' home at 10 Rillington Place, they discovered the assemblages of Beryl and Geraldine enveloped with a fabric. The case appeared to be open and shut, and Evans was executed. Fast forward 3 years, and something startling occurred. Police assaulted 10 Rillington Place again and discovered 6 female bodies covered up there. The ladies had been killed by John Christie, who had utilized their carcasses for sexual delight. He'd even cleaved one lady up and transformed her body parts into furniture. Christie was a chronic executioner. Evans had been directly about him. The coming about outrage achieved the abolishment of capital punishment in Britain, though solely after Christie had been hanged. Evans was after death gave a regal exculpation. It arose that police had constrained him into marking a bogus admission, which made a public outrage. However, for all that, it didn't transform one straightforward truth. Timothy Evans had lost his life for a wrongdoing that he didn't perpetrate. As it were, he was John Christie's last casualty.